continue on the basis of the supernatural, but to touch on a personal matter as well. I know that you recently lost your wife on August the 11th of last year.
Yes.
I've been reading your website, and it seems as though you're still in contact with Anne. Is she still reaching? Is she actually reaching out to you? Is she there with you on occasion? What's going on with that?
Oh, Anne and I are still together. She's not in the physical, but we're both using the body I'm in.
You're sharing the same body. How does that work?
How does it work? Well, she talks to me like I was at a meeting last night, and toward the end of the meeting, she said, "You need to let me talk. I've got some things to say, and you've been ignoring me. You've ignored me here for the past 2 weeks." And I said, "All right." And I heard what she was saying, and it came through, and I said, I suppose you'd call it channeling. I guess, but there have been so many things that have happened. Right at first, for example, when she finished with her body and was out of it, gone. First of all, I can go out of my body, so I followed her. I stayed with her as long as I could.
Wow.
And went together with her through the initial phase of it, which can be pretty scary. And then I had to back off because there's a kind of cord that connects us to the physical. And if you break that cord, as I have in the past, then you got a little devil of a time getting back into your body. It's hard. And I couldn't well believe that I could get into a situation where it was impossible, where in fact I died. The physical body died. And I don't believe that we have a right to give up a perfectly healthy physical body. I do not think so, because we can't tell what the future may bring to us, and we can't tell our value to others. In Anne's case, her body was finished. It was not functioning anymore, and she died. So there's nothing wrong with that. That happens to everyone. As our doctor says, Whitley said, "I have to warn you, I have a 100% death rate in my practice." And so anyway, after a couple of days, I was so bereft. The agony of grief was fantastic. 45 years of marriage, the only woman I have ever known physically, and the light of my life. You cannot imagine. She was brilliant. She was so sweet and good in a deep, deep way. If ever there was such a thing as a person without sin, it was Anne. And Anne was, she was everything to me. My writing life, my intellectual life, my emotional life, my physical life, my sexual life, everything was Anne. And then suddenly I'm there with this beautiful little body and no life in it anymore. It was hard. And the first thing that happened was, later that night, a friend called and said, "Whitley, I want to tell you that I had the strangest feeling. Is Anne all right?" I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I had this thought that I had to call you and tell you Anne is right with you. Where is she?" And I said to the lady, "She died 2 hours ago." That was the first thing. Then I went out to the country with my family, with my kids, to just spend a couple of days away from the house. And I was sitting on a bench in the mountains in the mountains above Palm Springs, California. And I was thinking to myself, I was meditating and thinking, "Annie, if you're anywhere near me, please let me know." And suddenly my phone rang in my pocket. And I pulled it out and opened it, and I punched it up. It's an iPhone. It was another person on the line, someone who said, "Whitley," now this is a person who knew that Anne had died by this time. She said, "Whitley, I just had the strangest thing happen. I felt I had to call you and tell you Anne is right beside you." And that was the second time. And then the third time came a few weeks later. I was at a William Henry conference in Nashville, and a lady came up to me looking very embarrassed and nonplussed and said, "Mr. Strieber, do you have a special chair at home?" And I thought, well, that's one of the stranger questions I've been asked by a total stranger. And I said, well, what are you talking about? A rocking chair or something? She said. She seemed very embarrassed. I said, well, what's going on? And I said, because I don't know quite how to answer this question. And she said, well, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I just had a message from Anne. And Anne says she can see you when you're sitting in the chair. Of course, this message was immensely meaningful to me. It was like many of the things that have happened with Anne since she parted her body, that it was tremendously informative, and I'll tell you why. First, I meditate every night. Now I meditate much more than that, but in those days I was just meditating every night. And I sit in a certain chair, in a certain place. And her saying she could see me when I was in the chair, and I knew immediately what it meant. Because I asked the visitors 30 years ago, maybe 25 or 30 years ago, of why they had come. And they said, we saw a glow. And I thought, oh, well, they must have seen the glow of cities and so forth. But the moment I heard that woman say she can see you when you're sitting in the chair, I immediately became aware of the fact that they had come because they could see a glow when I meditated in a certain way. And Anne can see me, and anyone can see you if from that level of reality, if you do this. That was tremendously informative, and it was the beginning of the building of something Anne and I had always hoped we would be able to build after the first of us died, which was a path between the worlds. The path is built with attention, and the bricks, or the bridge is built with attention, I should say, and it is made of love. And that's how you communicate between the worlds. That's what it's about. And that's how we do. Right now, I'm sitting here and I'm wearing 2 wedding rings side by side. My wedding ring, third finger left hand, and on the pinky finger, Anne's wedding ring. We are both sharing this body at this time.
That is beautiful, just simply beautiful.
Well, this marriage did not happen to end till death did us part. Go until death did us part. It went beyond that, as they often do. I'm not talking about something unusual, and many of your older listeners will agree that they are indeed still in relationship with their loved ones, and Anne and I will reunite when I leave my body for the last time. Mm-hmm. And I have been with her out of body a number of times. At first, I couldn't go because the powers that be wouldn't let me out, because they thought that if I got to Anne, I wouldn't come back. But finally, I managed to get out and get to Anne, and I did come back, and now I can come and go freely. It's okay. And so, in that state, I encounter her. Now, it has to be understood. A person in that state is not like us. She's not like us. And the one I knew as Anne will never be Anne. That person is dead. That body is dead. What is there now is an extraordinary being, because all of her lives, the whole long shadow of her soul is now filled with consciousness. And this being, it loves me very much. It has a lot of love in a lot of different ways, though. And it is, in many ways, very exotic to be with. And yet at the same time, it's the Anne I always knew. And, this is the way the dead are. They're not like us. The dead are a complete consciousness from its inception to the present moment. And that means that They have a clear memory and a clear understanding of all of the lives they've lived. And mostly you find that these lives are not all lived on the same planet at all. And we're really very peripatetic beings. And not only that, uh, we are all expressions of a greater consciousness. There's tremendous individuality, as you may imagine. If you can imagine somebody who was 500 years or 1,000 years old, they would be a highly evolved individuality. And that's true. But they are also part of a much larger consciousness. The web of being is incredibly beautiful, incredibly large, vast beyond words. They don't even see the universe the same way we do. I'll tell you the difference. When we look out with a telescope or look up into the night sky, we see the burning stars of this level of reality. In the other level of reality, those stars are hardly relevant. They're just shadows. What you see instead are planets, what we call planets, which are where there are concentrations of conscious beings. You know immediately where the intelligent species are on planets, or the conscious species, because you can see the living planets, and that's what the universe is made of. In that level, it's an absolute ocean of living planets, and not only that, they're all connected like a web. It's not a series of disconnected dots of light. It's an enormous web of living light. It's fantastic, fantastic. Beautiful beyond belief. So precious to be able to see that. She showed it to me. When I said to her I was very worried about Earth, that the Earth was going to collapse, and the environment was going to collapse, and what would happen to us all trying to recycle in lives on Earth. And she said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's a soul factory. There's millions of them. Let me show you." And I saw this vision before me. And I realized that when we use this planet up, we'll go and do this elsewhere, and this planet will gradually rebuild itself, and then someone will come along and probably eat it up again, and it'll rebuild itself again, and so on, down the vast ages of time.
Several hours later, saying that Anne Strieber, the spirit of Anne Strieber, had something else she wanted to add, but at that point, Whitley wasn't listening to her. So, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to allow you the opportunity to allow Anne and Whitley the opportunity to finish this show. And here is her message.
After we completed the interview, Anne Strieber showed up complaining to me that I had not listened to her during the conversation, which is true. It's very hard to do that because obviously she speaks in my mind now rather than physically. Here is what she said. She said that the bridge between the worlds is made of love, not grief. That grief weighs you down. That love is what makes it possible to communicate. That you should concentrate on the love you feel for those you wish to communicate with who have departed, and do the meditation exercise that I outlined. It is very important, though, that it be love, not grief. She said that there is a vast effort on the other side to call us, but that we don't hear because we're blocked by grief, by disbelief, and by the fact that there's no body there. And without a body, it's difficult to hear the voice. It takes practice and patience, but it will happen. And also, there will be signs, like I've had in my own life. And she assured me that many are capable of making these signs. So if you go to my website, unknowncountry.com, and read some of my recent journal entries, you'll see what kind of signs I'm speaking of, and also, as was discussed in the interview,